I cannot stop thinking about the fields. So my first image is of the fields. I can easily remember this very long road going east, 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 and more east, with the fields on left side, right side. And it was really, really impressive to see how from big cities we were going through small villages and then eventually to the place where we arrived, which is the town called Popasna, and in the eastern area of Ukraine.
Yeah, of course, you really see the difference and you feel the difference as well. There are less and less cars around, non-military cars. What you see is a strong military presence in barracks, but also on the street. And also you see where some clashes in the previous years, since 2014, happened. You can still see the damage. You can still see also some military installations like bunkers or also wooden palisades. And then you hear, and then the street ends actually, and you just drive over a normal path to the city because the street is not existent anymore. Heavy equipment was moved at night, so you could hear the convoys, and you could then hear also some shooting in the background. And some days earlier there was an artillery strike directly near that village. You could always see that on LiveMed Ukraine, what happens on the front line. And so it was really, the feeling was, it was a threatening feeling. I mean, I've been in the military for 12 years, but then you are in the military, you are a soldier, you have weapons to yourself, you have armored vest, you have armored vehicles, but now we were vulnerable as a small NGO with no protection.
Like hundreds of communities in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine, Popasna has lay in the shadow of conflict for the better half of the past decade. An almost forgotten struggle on Europe's doorstep, the war in Donbass has ground to a stalemate as ceasefire negotiators slowly work towards a consensus. Civilian life in the region continues, in spite of the risks posed by ongoing violence. Even when shots are not being fired, remnants of war remain a constant threat to anyone who may stumble across one, killing and maiming without consideration.
So my name is Ilaria. I come from Italy and I moved to the Netherlands a couple of years ago. And that was a period where I was looking for, of course, a job, but also something nice to do alongside with applying for jobs. And that is when I encountered Mindmark.
I'm Nils Hegel. I'm one of the two co-founders of the Mindmark Foundation. And we are a mind risk education project that educates children in conflict areas on how to behave in landmine affected areas. We translate the United Nations Mine Action Service guidelines into cartoons, games, and videos.
The Mindmark Foundation brings mine risk education to the classrooms of conflict regions. They focus on rural communities, places that even in times of peace are far removed from the rest of the world. This education includes what we think of when we hear landmines, but it doesn't stop there. Mindmark also covers identification and safety guidelines for discarded grenades, unexploded ordnance, and other remnants of war. Even long after conflicts have ended, these artifacts continue to endanger civilian populations, who are left with no choice but to live with the impact. Unexploded ordnance from the Second World War still disrupts life in cities like Berlin and London, though today casualties are rare. In the Donbass and other war-torn regions around the world, they are commonplace. According to data collected by the United Nations, since 2014, more than 1,000 civilians have been killed by remnants of war in Ukraine alone. Globally, 4 out of 5 landmine victims are children. In the Donbass, an active conflict zone, remnants of war accumulate as fighting continues.
Usually the United Nations provides guidelines that look like big books and lots of paper. But we understood that there was something missing, so a way to communicate this mind risk education to children in a more effective and a bit friendlier way. So we adapted all of these United Nations guidelines into some board games, some engaging activities, a cartoon with the superheroes that are part of the MindMark story mainly. And we created a package that comes really like a paper package that each kid can play with and engage with. And we distributed these packages, spent some time in the classes, played with the children, and that is the core, at the core, I would say, of the activity the MindMark does. We engage usually with children around 7, 8, 9 years old, more or less. Yeah, we do go to places that are facing the risks and the challenges of the mines on almost on a daily basis. And these children are grown up in conflict contexts. So it's not rare that some of the children have a background story that involves mines.
The schools there in Popasna, they are well aware of the danger. They already got some sort of mine risk education there, of course with a different approach, but they have some experience, which makes it actually a good concept that you build upon prior knowledge from the kids. But when they play, they really think about it again and can really repeat how does a landmine look, how does a warning sign look, the basic rules of how to behave in that area. That's really nice to see that they build upon prior knowledge and gain new knowledge and then repeat the knowledge. It's really nice. We are still in contact with them, and of course we try to arrange a new field trip to the schools and also to provide them with what they need with the online education, also with more posters, with more stickers, with new types of games. So we try to create more content, because that's what they ask us as well, that they have a variety of games that they can play with children on a regular basis, and that the children get educated over and over again, because that's what you need.
That's the only way to be sustainable, to have really an impact, and to make sure that things are done right, because nobody but the locals know what's right for themselves. So I just believe, and MindMark has always worked with local organization or governmental organization to ensure that every country has its own story, reality. Every town can be different from other towns in the same country. So to make sure that the material that we have is tailor-made to the needs, we really have to engage with locals.
And what they all told us, the directors and the kids, that they would love to have it online, on computers, on tablets, on smartphones. And that's where we're working on right now. We try to transfer our materials in an online design, an online education platform. That will be the next step.
Online education was a goal for MindMark even before the global pandemic forced it upon the entire world. For MindMark, COVID-19 emerged just as they were wrapping up their visit in Ukraine. This was supposed to be the first part of a two-leg journey, the second half of which was a visit to Azerbaijan, following up on the previous year's work. This trip was cancelled as the team scrambled just to get back home ahead of the lockdown.
So actually, we were the last day of the school. One day after they closed due to Corona, and when we drove back to Kharkiv, we were not even allowed in our hotel because they closed as well. So we had to look for another accommodation, which we luckily found. And we were one of the last flights out, and it was also it was a serious situation, because one day afterwards, no flights were going out for several months from Kharkiv and from Ukraine in general. So we were quite lucky. And it appeared so quick. I mean, There was some news before, but it wasn't a big thing yet. And then it erupted, and Ukraine got crazy because they had in the beginning, I think, 10 or 20 cases, and then they closed everything off, which I also can somehow understand. Because in hindsight, it saved a lot of lives. But in that moment, it felt also threatening to not go back.
As borders shut down and society isolates ourselves from our shared unseen threat, the most vulnerable communities become even more exposed. Strict quarantine measures in Ukraine likely saved thousands of lives. The lockdown also seems to have hampered the peacemaking process. In March, as quarantines hung an eerie calm over most of our cities, the Donbas region saw an increase in fighting, the worst in months. There are fears that the peace efforts have collapsed entirely. With the world's eyes elsewhere, war continues unimpeded, a slowly accumulating stock of unexploded ordnance, waiting for an unsuspecting soul. Through all of this adversity, life in the Donbass continues. The Mindmark team are just part of a larger group of NGOs, teachers, and community leaders working to make life in Popasna better for future generations.
I would say that the teachers in particular in Ukraine do make an effort to make their students' lives brighter every day. So I can say that I saw a personal commitment of the teachers to make the classroom nicer with decorations, engage in a lot of dances and performance in general with the students outside in the garden, play with them, make arts and crafts, everything that is a reminder that they're still children, even though they have seen very bad stuff happening. They are still children, and the teachers do whatever they can to make them more happier, really.
But they rebuild everything. You can also, on the other hand, see restructuring processes going on nearly everywhere. So the government is really investing a lot of money in rebuilding everything. And then you come to Popasna, which is the old communist-looking town. For me, I'm from East Germany, so I know it as well. And which feels a bit desperate, of course, as well. But the people are still happy. It's their life. They live there, so they try to cope with everything. And you can also see that. The small things matter in that city as well.
You understand that the reality that you perceive through social media, through news, can be a bit different from your own personal impression when you go to places. However, I would say that professionally and for Mindmark, what I've learned is the importance of going and also be there, because most of the time these villages and these towns are isolated from international contact. So it's so pleasant to see that the kids, the students are really happy to see something new. And I would say I would always love to have the team of Mindmark going to the classroom and not just, one day do online education, because I really saw the difference between delivering education through a link or a platform and also being there and communicating face to face.
What we felt that we need to go there more often, because they really need our help. They really need people caring about them. And also to spread the message, to spread the word that people in Europe, they suffer from war and conflict. The media presence is going back and decreasing the whole time, so you don't hear a lot about Ukraine anymore. But the conflict is still there. People still die. People still get wounded. So it's not in the Western minds anymore. And that's what we also try to change.
it's not the first time that I go to conflict areas. I am aware of how realities between few hours flight can change. I am aware of where I live and the kind of society, what kind of privilege I am in every day. So I am very aware of what I could see. It's so unfair that has to be this way. It is this way rather than has to be, sorry. I just felt relieved and lucky, basically, to live in a situation where I don't have to face daily threats like this. But it also gave me really, really the answer of why I do all of this, because I do not believe that this is the way it should be. And if there is anything that I can do to help, because I'm not sure I will be able to change it, but at least I want to do my part, and I want to be sure that I've done it properly.
This story was written and produced by me, Connor McMullen. Music by Scott Holmes. This story uses data collected by the United Nations and UNICEF. For more information about Mindmark's work, visit mindmark.org or check them out on social media. For more stories like this, get in touch with me or go to policymythology.com.